Going to a shelter and finding the perfect pet can be tricky. It's sometimes hard to really know where the animal has been or what its quirks are. That was especially the case with this white kitten. She had already been brought back under very suspicious circumstances, but nobody could have expected this reason. But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. Jonathan sat in his car, fingers drumming lightly against the steering wheel as he scanned the directions on his phone. The shelter was only a few streets away, and his heart fluttered with a mix of nervousness and excitement. His niece's birthday was approaching fast, and after weeks of consideration, he'd settled on the perfect gift – a kitten. Not just any kitten, though. Jonathan was determined to find one from a sheltera young one who deserved a second chance at a loving home. He wanted to do things right, though. This wasn't just about picking the cutest cat he could find. Jonathan planned to keep the kitten with him for a month, for a specific reason. Jonathan wanted to get to know its personality and ensure it was a good match for his niece. She was his favorite person in the world, after all, and he wouldn't settle for anything less than perfection. The shelter came into Viewa Modest Building with a large sign that read, "Second Chances Animal Rescue." Jonathan parked and stepped out, and as he approached the entrance, he already noticed the faint sound of barking and meowing from inside. "Welcome," said a cheerful woman behind the counter as Jonathan entered. Her name tag read Karen. After explaining his mission, Karen seemed thrilled to help Jonathan. But that would soon change. "That's wonderful! We've got quite a few kittens right now. Let me show you around." Jonathan followed her through multiple clean, bright rooms filled with cages and enclosures. Nymals of all shapes and sizes occupied each one, playful puppies tumbling over each other, sleepy cats curled up in corners, and a few older animals watching him curiously. They stopped at a room near the back. Karen gestured at a row of enclosures. "These are the kittens. Take your time." Jonathan walked slowly, peering into each space. Most of the enclosures housed multiple kittens, all playful and eager for attention. But one enclosure at the end of the row was different. Inside was a single, tiny white kitten. Its fur was fluffy and slightly unkempt, and its big blue-green eyes looked up at him with a mixture of curiosity and sadness. It nuzzled its tiny nose against his palm through the bars, purring faintly. "This one," he said softly, turning to Karen. "I want this one." Karen hesitated. "Are you sure? This kitten, well, it's been through a bit of a strange situation." Jonathan raised an eyebrow. "Strange how?" Karen sighed. "Well, it already had a new owner before. The man hastily dropped it off here just a week ago, no explanation, no paperwork. He practically bolted after handing the kitten over. We found it odd, but he wouldn't stay long enough to answer any questions." Jonathan frowned but looked back at the kitten. It gazed up at him, its purring growing louder. "Maybe he just wasn't a good fit," Jonathan said firmly. "I think she deserves better." Karen gave a reluctant smile. "If you're sure, I'll get the paperwork." Jonathan nodded. "I'm sure." This hastened decision, made purely out of emotion, was one Jonathan would soon regret, though, because there was a good reason why her former owner wanted her gone. On the drive home, the kitten, whom Jonathan had already named Sally, sat in a small carrier on the passenger seat. Occasionally, she mewed, and Jonathan reached over to reassure her with soft words. "This is going to be good," he murmured, more to himself than to the kitten. "We're going to get you ready for the best home ever." After turning into his driveway and shutting off his engine, Jonathan looked inside the carrier. Sally was staring back at him, making a purry sound, indicating that she was calm and trusting of the situation. Jonathan smiled at the kitten, saying that Sally was going to be perfect, or so he thought. The first few days with Sally were uneventful. Jonathan set up a cozy corner for her in the living room, complete with a soft bed, toys, and a scratching post. Sally spent most of her time exploring the house, her tiny paws pattering across the floor. She seemed curious and playful, much like any other kitten. Jonathan quickly grew fond of her antics. She had a habit of chasing her tail in endless circles, only to collapse in a heap of fluff, panting from the effort. At night, she'd curl up by his feet on the couch as he watched TV, purring softly until she drifted off to sleep. But this cute behavior would soon end abruptly. Soon, little things began to stand out. Sally developed a strange obsession with movement outside. often chasing shadows and even bumping her head repeatedly against the glass floor-to-ceiling windows. Sometimes she'd pause mid-play and stare out into the empty garden, completely still. Jonathan brushed it off as normal kitten antics that changed one night when he was awakened by a soft scraping noise. He found Sally pawing at the window, her wide eyes reflecting the glow of the street lamp, though nothing was visible outside. Annoyed, Jonathan tried to settle her down, but she cried loudly through the night. In the morning, he noticed small, fresh scratch marks on the window frame. He laughed it off, thinking she was just restless, and teased, "You're going to destroy this place before I even give you to Emily." Sally purred, but her eyes were fixated elsewhere. Later that morning, while watering the garden, Jonathan spotted something unusual near the same window, this time on the outside. As he stepped closer, he realized there were deep gashes on the exterior frame, directly opposite the marks Sally had made inside. Unlike the delicate ones she'd left, these were violent, with splinters jutting out from the wood. Jonathan shivered. These weren't from a cat or even a neighborhood dog. This looked like something much larger. Concerned, he ordered security cameras to monitor the property. He tried to rationalize the scratches as a coincidence. Maybe a wild animal had mimicked Sally's sounds or movements. Still, he hoped the cameras would provide clarity if anything returned. Meanwhile, Sally's behavior escalated. Her appetite became insatiable. She devoured her food quickly and began growling whenever Jonathan approached. He started to question if she was the right companion for a child. Her fixation turned toward Jonathan's food, especially meat. She'd sit staring at the refrigerator, watching him with intensity. One night, after working late, Jonathan returned home expecting a hungry greeting. Instead, he walked into chaos. Hands rolled toward him as he entered. Loud clattering came from the kitchen. Rushing in, Jonathan found Sally inside the fridge. She had somehow pried it open and torn through every package of meat. Even the freezer had been raided. It was a shocking scene far beyond what any kitten should be capable of. Meat packages were shredded. Bones were strewn across the floor. Sally growled as she chewed through a frozen pork chop. Jonathan, stunned and disturbed, gently pulled her away, nearly getting bitten in the process. Something wasn't right. No ordinary kitten could do this. With a heavy heart, Jonathan placed Sally in a cage to keep her and his home safe. He hated the idea, but it was necessary. Not long after, the doorbell rang. The cameras had arrived. Jonathan signed for the package and carried it inside. He wasted no time. 4 were installed outside to monitor the garden from every angle. 1 was placed indoors to keep an eye on Sally. Maybe, just maybe, these cameras would finally reveal what was really going on. That night, the cameras were finally activated, and Sally was let loose in the house, but with a purpose. Jonathan hoped she would repeat her strange behavior and draw back whatever had left those deep scratches. This time, he'd be ready. Around 3 in the morning, the now familiar sound of scratching returned. But Jonathan didn't intervene. He let the scene unfold, confident he'd catch the culprit on video. At dawn, he examined the house. Furniture had been knocked over, and new scratch marks appeared on the inside frame. Outside, there were more deep gashes in the same spot. Without delay, Jonathan rushed to his computer, downloaded the footage, and found the right timestamp. What he saw stunned him. A massive white feline had been prowling his garden, responding to Sally's cries. Realizing the danger, he called the police and posted the footage online to alert neighbors. Within minutes, messages started pouring in. To Jonathan's surprise, he also received a message from Sally's previous owner. Soon after, police, animal patrol, and the former owner all arrived. Sally sat calmly in the living room as if waiting for them. Jonathan showed the footage, explaining what he believed. Sally wasn't just a stray, she was a wild feline, and the creature outside was likely her mother. The video clearly showed Sally pawing at the window as the large cat clawed from the other side, desperately trying to reach her. It was an emotional revelation. The former owner admitted he had experienced these same events but had no proof and was dismissed as delusional. Authorities decided to act. That night, they set a trap. Sally's task was simple: repeat the behavior that lured the wildcat. And shortly after midnight, it worked. The large white feline entered the garden, moving toward the house. Jonathan watched from his monitor as the cat reached the window. Then came the soft pop of a tranquilizer gun. The animal dropped silently. Inside, Sally cried out a heartbreaking sound, but it was necessary. Both cats were soon transported to a sanctuary 200 miles away. A week later, Jonathan and the previous owner were invited to visit the sanctuary. There, they learned the truth. Sally and her mother were white cougars, an extremely rare species. How they ended up in suburbia remained unknown, but their bond had been undeniable. The staff reassured them. The cats were now safe, together, and cared for. As for the original plan of gifting Sally to his niece, Jonathan made a wiser choice. He returned to the shelter and picked a gentle red and white house cat, one that had belonged to a loving owner and was used to family life.